Hello, everyone. In this unit, we're going to discuss the concepts of sensation and perception. So, what is sensation and perception? Well, sensation refers to the physical energies of the world interacting with you. Somehow, you have to have the ability to change photons of light or sound waves or mechanical pressure on your finger into some type of neural signal that your body can then process. And this is what's known as sensation, that detection of external stimuli. This is different than perception. Perception is how you perceive the stimuli coming in, whether you think the image you're looking at is pleasant or unpleasant, or that the sound you're hearing is annoying or it is pretty. Those type of perceptions of the sensations are very individualized. Sensations are, for the most part, the same for every individual. You have those of you who are watching this video right now, you have the same photons of light that are coming from your screen, the same auditory waves that are being generated by a speaker. All of those aspects are the same. However, your thoughts and feelings and interpretation of what you are seeing can be very individualized, and all of you can have different ideas or processes of how you would perceive what you're seeing right now. In order for us to be able to have these sensations, we need sensory receptors. Each of our different senses has different types of receptors that can detect the physical stimulations. So there is a receptor that can change photons of light into neural signals. There are receptors that can sense the waves and the sound, or can pick up on the chemicals in when you eat something or when you smell something. After these receptors then are interacted with and translate that information, we then need to transduce that information where the sensory receptors change the physical stimuli into the signals that are eventually sent to the brain. So, this diagram kind of gives us a general overview of how our senses work. At first, we have a physical stimuli that sends, in this example, a visual stimulus that is then sent to the eye, or rather, our eyes detect it. And then we have a transduction where those sensory receptors that pick up, in this case, visual information, change that into a neural signal that is then sent into the central nervous system. And then our brain then perceives that information. In this case, you have a physical stimuli of a green light, and then your brain has to perceive that that means in this situation that I can drive through the intersection. There are different areas of the brain that are responsible for our different senses. Typically, we have a primary cortex that's associated with each of the major senses. So we have a primary olfactory cortex located in the lower part of our frontal lobes. We have a primary gustatory cortex, which is related to taste, which is also in the frontal lobes, but further back. We have a primary somatosensory cortex in the front part of the parietal lobe, which helps us to perceive touch. We have a primary visual cortex in the occipital lobe, which is important for the perception of vision. And we have a primary auditory cortex that's located in our temporal lobes that help us perceive hearing. Now, in order to sense information, the sensory input must be high enough for us to be able to do this. And so, this is the idea of absolute threshold. This is the smallest amount of a physical stimuli that's required to detect a sensory input. So, you can think of something that's very quiet that you can't actually hear, or you're in a dark room and there is some amount of light that's needed for you to be able to detect something in that room. There's also a concept of a difference threshold, also known as a just noticeable difference. In other words, how much change needs to be in the physical stimuli before you recognize that that change has occurred. If you were listening to music, how much could someone turn up the volume knob before you could say, oh, that's louder? Or how much could someone turn up the brightness of a light before you would notice that it is brighter in the room? So there's some different absolute thresholds for each of our different senses. So in this table, it kind of gives some rough ideas that in taste, about 1 teaspoon of sugar dissolved in 2 gallons of water. Smell, 1 drop of perfume diffused into an entire volume of 6 rooms. Touch, a fly's wing falling on your cheek from a distance of zero point zero 0.04 inches. I bet that was an interesting experiment they did on that one. Hearing the tick of a clock about 20 feet in a quiet room, and then vision, a candle flame 30 miles away on a dark, clear night. And that's kind of interesting too.